Welcome, listeners, to the very first episode of BrandMe360. And this is our podcast, which is dedicated to helping you navigate the world of branding. My name is James.
And I'm Veronica.
And over the course of several episodes, we're going to be diving into everything you need to know to create and sustain a powerful personal or business brand. So whether you're a solopreneur, small business, or maybe just someone trying to understand the ins and outs of branding, well, this podcast is for you. Each episode will bring you insights and tips and real life stories to help you build a brand that stands out and resonates. So thank you for listening, and let's get started on your branding journey with BrandMe360. Veronica, can we just start with you just telling our listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Veronica, obviously, and I started a business about nearly 5 years ago now called Wanderlust Custom Design, and I help creatives and spiritual entrepreneurs to develop their brand. And then we distill that across multiple tools, including a custom designed website. It is something that I have evolved into, which we won't quite get into that whole story just yet, but maybe in the future episodes we can. My background is in music and art and graphic design. I'm also a former yoga instructor, and I have done meditation workshops, and I bring all of that into the brand process so that I really get to know my clients and really take what is on their inside so that we can bring that out and use that as a way for others to connect with them. So that's a little snippet.
Great.
James,
and I appreciate that. Especially kind of talking a little bit about your past being diverse, in terms of your experience and what you've done. I come from a similar background, though I've been in the technology sphere for a few decades, so that dates me a little bit. But I have been working as a developer of websites dating back to the 90s, late 90s. And I've been in and out of the technology sphere since then. I do also have some retail experience while I was putting myself through college, which surprisingly has actually really helped me on my own branding journey, as I just started my own freelance business a few years ago, Tech. And the main focus of what I do is full stack development. So mostly WordPress websites, so design development, and managed web hosting. And that's actually how Veronica and I got connected a long time ago. We, I think it was on a forum for one of the WordPress page builders. Is that about right?
Yeah, I was looking for a developer because I was getting more and more into the realm of hosting responsibilities, which I didn't want to do. Not that I can't do it. There are some things that I'm still not completely comfortable with when it comes to development. So I was looking for someone to partner with and put out a message on a forum. And I actually talked to several people, and James and we just connected. So it was like I think I've called you my business soul partner.
Right. Which has worked out really well for us over time, because I think what is in my wheelhouse tends to be more on the technical side of things, and where I was really struggling was not only with graphic design, real custom graphic design work for my clients, which a lot of them need, but also from the branding perspective. That although I have experience and some background in that, mostly it's from the technical side of things, supporting marketing and branding needs. So I knew enough to be dangerous. But when Veronica and I kind of connected over this topic, it just really gelled. So I'm really fortunate to have worked with Veronica on this over time, as I've had clients over the years, like who need more sophisticated work on graphic design elements and branding elements. And then we just kind of talked about it and realized we have a lot that we can share with others where it comes to our journey and our perspectives on branding. So again, welcome to our podcast. This is our first one, so we really want this to be a foundational podcast. We want to kind of get people entrenched in what we mean when we're talking about branding. You know, what are some of the misconceptions that a lot of people have about branding, including myself, because I did my own branding when I made my own company, and there's some pros and cons to that. Um, but there's a lot of opportunities for us to kind of talk about, you know, what are some of the things that come up when people are starting their journey with branding. You know, what are some of the misconceptions, and even some, you know, definitional things about differences between branding and marketing, which are, there are definitely
Mhm.
differences. So to kind of start, Veronica, what is your perspective and kind of definition of branding? Just kind of giving us a general overview what we're really talking about here.
There is a definition that I came across, and I'm not going to remember it exactly word for word, but it is the experience you create for your audience over time. And over time is the key because everyone thinks a brand is one and done. And that's one of the misconceptions we'll probably talk about. Once my brand is created by this graphic designer, I'm done with it. But that's not really true because it's every aspect and every way that you connect with your audience is part of your brand. So it's how you appear on video or the copy that you use. Some people even use like specific backgrounds and everything as well, so that all of that is very consistent when they're
Mm.
on video.
Just to
Every
step
time
back
you,
a little bit, sorry to
yeah,
interrupt.
no worries.
When you said copy, for some of our listeners might not know what you
Yeah,
mean
that's true.
by copy.
So copy art is the wording specifically that you're using, whether it's a social media post or an email newsletter that you're sending out or the words on the website, anything along those lines, the tone of voice, all of that plays into it. So again, it's an overall experience. And if you think about a brand that you're very familiar with, I like to use, let's say, Starbucks as an example. When you hear the word Starbucks, you might immediately get a picture in your mind of the green, the logo, how it feels when you walk into a Starbucks, the brown counters, the barista with the green apron on. You know, you picture the cups and you know what kind of coffee that you're going to get before you even walk in there. So that's all part of their brand. That whole experience of walking in there and what music is playing, all of that, it's all planned out. So, another misconception that we'll probably dig into maybe on another episode is that branding is only for big companies. That's not true either. Every entrepreneur, every nonprofit, and even if you nowadays, because there's so many things that are online, even if you're just career hunting, you have a personal brand that as you're appearing on social media. So
Hmm.
it's the
So
persona that you're putting out there. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Your persona when you're talking about personal branding. I feel like that's a really good way of describing that. Um, I know that in my branding journey, I was struggling coming up with a name for my business. I didn't want to just use my own name for my business. I really wanted to, you know, grow and have kind of an agency mindset, so that over time, if I wanted to bring in additional people, staff, things like that, that I would have an overarching kind of name and brand. And where I really struggled with wasn't really kind of coming up with what my goals were, like my main tagline and things like that. I just dove right in and tried to create a logo because I felt that logo was really what drives everything for my brand. And that is generally just the perspective of a web developer, I think, in terms of like, as if I can get that logo from my client and get that established on the website, I can build everything else around that.
Hmm.
So perhaps that's something that we can talk about too as we go into misconceptions. um, so one of the things that we had talked about, Veronica, is with branding over time, like how your perception over time might change, or be influenced. Can you just talk about that a little bit
Do you mean from the audience point of view or from your own?
from your own point of view?
Yes, yes. So, as an entrepreneur, I'm sure James experienced this. I know I did as well, and many of my clients. When you're first starting off, you have, your ideas of who you're going to serve, what you're going to be serving them, and how you're going to be serving them. But everything, as you start to work in the real world, you begin to find your little niches and you begin to pivot in all three of those areas. So I usually recommend to people, don't brand first. What
Hmm.
you need to do is get some clients and establish your vision. Those are the most important things.
Hmm.
A lot of people have that, like what you just said. Oh, if I get my logo, then everything will fall into place after that. But really, there's other work that needs done before you get to that point. And
Okay.
I know, like, I did the same thing as you. I had this like, I came up with a name for an agency rather than just myself, imagining that in the future I would have more of a team. And I think you and I have talked about in the past how both of our names are just a little bit not okay.
Right.
People mispronounce yours, and mine is clever because it's Wanderlust, because I wanted to put in the wonder in there, but most people end up spelling it Wanderlust, which is the real word.
Right.
So very, very minor things that I just didn't think about, and probably you didn't think about either when you were creating the business name. But you always learn from those experiences, and then we can share that with the clients in the future. So
Well, absolutely. I think I thought the name for my business, Arawatech, was clever in that um, I wanted the kind of tagline that I have for my business is make peace with technology,
mhm.
because I wanted kind of a lot of double or multiple meanings or interpretations of that. But generally, that's my approach. I want to be compassionate, open minded, and peaceful in terms of my interactions with my clients, because a lot of people struggle with technology and are intimidated by it. And it really, I wanted to make it clear that, any question is acceptable. Your struggles with technology, I can empathize with that, and I want to help you without judgment. So so that's kind of where I started. And then I really played around with the concept of olives and the olive branch as, symbolic of peace.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then that's how I ended up with Arawatech, because Ara was this Macedonian, like, ancient word for olive or olive branch. And then I just put that together with tech. But then what I ran into is people really struggled pronouncing it, understanding it, even spelling it correctly. And these are just things that didn't cross my mind when I came up with it. I came up with the word and was like, oh, sure, this will work. Um, so,
And it
um,
is like, it's okay, because if you think about, once people get to know you, it all completely makes sense, you know. So, and that right there is also a testimony to your brand being more than your logo. It's more than your company name too. So it's that whole thing you just described of, I want to help other people understand that technology is nothing to be afraid of. And by the way, just a little caveat for all of you out there that struggle with technology, we just had some technological problems starting this. So, so you just got to keep going and be patient with it. We still have issues too. So don't worry.
Right.
And my brand story is pretty similar. Like I wanted to have something that was clever and represented that I'm nomadic. So the whole wanderlust notion and the whole my handle is digital gypsy. So playing with that um, idea of being a digital nomad and doing the work that I do as well. So, and
Right.
again, people don't quite get it until they talk to me, which is great because then I love talking to people and it just works out. You know, like, oh, that's why you're a digital gypsy, you know?
Yep, same. I had an opportunity in a kind of a local neighborhood, kind of business oriented newspaper to get interviewed and have an article and kind of explain my brand and my vision and things like that. And that became a great marketing opportunity, which, again, by the way, we're
Mhm.
going to try to go into that a little bit later, differences between branding and marketing. But I enjoyed that. I enjoyed explaining it. And then people came out of the woodwork who had read the article and was like, oh, I had no idea. I knew you had this business. Had no idea really what it represented, what that word meant, and things like that. So it can be an opportunity. In retrospect, I might have adjusted that name a little bit to be easier to
Right, yeah.
pronounce, I understand. So I feel like we've really kind of established, what our perspectives are in terms of like for branding. It's really important to have a vision, and that vision drives your branding. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen in a linear process. It sounds like, from what you were saying, Veronica, that maybe a more organic approach to building your brand might work better. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, even though I have a outline of a process that I work through with everybody. We have a workbook we go through together. It's always different for each individual what's coming forward and what comes out of it. And I think that that whole process is important because it allows them to reflect on what really is my vision. Who do I really want to serve? And the brand comes out of all of that work. The logo is actually the last thing I do in branding.
Mm,
So
hmm.
it's not the first. So we do all the other work first. And then the logo comes out of that. And it's usually something that is very meaningful for the client. There's usually some symbology in it. And there's usually a little sprinkle of magic as well because that's just who I am, you know. And the process is very organic within a framework, if that makes sense.
I think it makes sense, especially as I was going through the process in the first year of having my own business, of trying to get everything settled down. I think I have the fortune of being a web developer, and so I had my own site and I could play around with it as much as I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
to try to get things right, from my perspective. Um, but I did have that early misconception of my branding really just being driven by a logo. So I'm glad you kind of pointed that out. That because I usually go for that first. Us also working with clients, it's like, do you have a logo? And try to start from there. But what it sounds like from what you're saying is that's kind of backwards. That there are steps we need to take leading up to that.
Yes, the logo evolves from the basic work of starting a business.
Mm,
So the process that I take them through is actually not unlike coaches that I've worked with for business, like the whole vision, mission, ideal client, all of that.
right.
And the the tone of voice is based on not only who you are, but also who you want to connect with, who's going to resonate with
Mm,
the the way that you present yourself. So knowing who you're talking to is very important. And the logo, that's why logos are so hard. because it's one symbol to encompass all of that.
Right.
And most people just think of it as, you know, um, probably the most famous logo would be the Nike swoosh, right? There's so much in that swoosh though, because even though it's this very simple, it's one of the most classic logos ever because it's extremely simple, yet it says so much because it's moving forward and it's propelling. And the orange color that is associated with Nike is a certain archetype, which we can get into that as well.
Hmm.
So there's so much involved in that logo. It's not just, oh, I like this image, I'm going to use that.
And I read recently that that logo originally cost Nike $35 to create. So just for listeners too, is that it's not necessarily an issue of how much you fund that effort to get that logo established. A lot of that probably comes from inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
and if you are inspired as a solopreneur or something like that, that to me seems like the fountainhead for what can become a solid symbol or logo for your branding. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, yes. Also, there's a tendency to want to put, and I'm guilty of this as a designer, by the way. There's a tendency to want to put too much into it. So, oh, but this symbol means this to me, and this symbol means that to me, and I want to get all of these in there. Really, it simple pictures are best, and I have to remind myself of that all the time because I tend to get very detail oriented. So that's just my own
Yeah.
struggle. But
No, same
yeah.
here. I think that from my perspective, I tend to be a little more of a perfectionist. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why I went through so many iterations of my own website and logo, which fonts I was using, all this. I mean, it really took me a long time to go through that, but we can talk about that. So, another misconception I was hoping we could talk about, because you had touched base on it earlier, is that branding is just for big companies. So have you experienced this kind of perspective in the wild, so to speak, that people come in thinking like, well, I'm not a big company. I'm just a solopreneur. I only have a small nonprofit. I don't really have to worry about branding. Have you seen that come up a lot?
I've seen, not particularly with my clients, but I've seen it with people that decide not to work with me.
Hmm. Hmm.
So they say like, well, this is probably too much. This is more than what I need. I just need a logo. And
Mm.
for that kind of perception, I say go ahead and go find somebody on Fiverr and tell them what you want and have them create it. Because if you're not understanding the entire reasoning behind a brand or even what it is exactly, then you're probably not ready for one. And
Right.
if you just want to get started and have a symbol, or Canva, use Canva. It has a lot of great little symbols you can use. And I've done that for people where they just want something fast and they just want a landing page. And I say, okay, well, we'll just make up this little symbol for you. You can start there, you know. And again, that goes back to understanding your vision and your mission and who you're working with and all of that. And as you evolve in your business, then you're ready for that
Hmm.
entire brand.
And that to me kind of leads into another misconception that I think I've witnessed in the wild, which is that if you have a product or a service, and it's really good, that's enough. You don't really need to dive too far into the branding process, in vision work and things like that. Um, so is that the case? Like if you have a really good product or service, you don't really need to think about the branding part of it too much.
Well, my first question is, if you have a really good product or service, how are you telling people about it if you don't have a brand?
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So even just like if you think about the the generic brand, right? So I don't know if you guys, if anyone's old enough to remember the white labels, but the white labels in the stores that were just generic and they were no brand, right? That was a brand. So even though it wasn't, didn't have a fancy logo or colors or anything like that, that black and white label in of itself is a brand. So if you're putting stuff out there and you're all over the place, then not only is that your brand, but it's not a very clear one. And you're not going to be able to build that audience or create any sort of following or community or anything like that, because nobody will recognize you the second time they see you. They might buy from you the first time, but then if you want those repeat people, you need to create that experience for them.
And
Again,
so,
over time,
yeah,
over
yeah,
time.
over time. And would you say, in your mind, when you're talking about over time in terms of developing a brand, general ballpark, like for, let's say, a solopreneur who's just started, they know the service they want to deliver, generally how long do you think it would take for someone to really kind of develop that brand over time?
It really depends on now we're getting into marketing.
Ah,
Because it
okay, okay.
depends on the strategy that you use. So if you're someone that um, maybe you only post on social media once a week, if at all, it's going to take you a lot longer to be recognized and to be in the forefront of people's minds than if you're doing it every day and on multiple platforms. And maybe you have a newsletter too, and maybe you have a website also. So I think it depends on the strategy that's in place for how long that will take. So right now this number keeps getting smaller, by the way. Our attention span as humans has
Mm.
shrank. We're down to, I think the last thing I read was 30 seconds before we're on to something else.
Mm.
So you have that window to make an impression, and it also takes anywhere between 7 and 12 impressions for someone to remember you. So if you're trying to do organic social media marketing, it is the hardest route because you have this long and you got to get it 7 times and you have to make it memorable. So that's really what we're talking about, is creating a memory for someone.
Right. And that's where, when I've talked to clients about, helping them build a logo, for example, is that I tend to recommend thinking about symbols and images first, and not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily incorporating like words and letters or things like that into the logo itself. To more focus on what is a picture or an image or something like that someone can see, and then it becomes recognizable and can be associated with what you do, and what your business does. Maybe even hints as to what the underlying vision is or what products you have. But again, you were talking about like how it's also a balance, because you don't want to throw every possible thing into that image
Right.
too. So yeah,
And
go
we
ahead.
also
Sorry.
do tend to remember images and colors more. We're visual creatures. We process with our eyes. And language is actually an interpretation. So it's another step back. So having that image, again, going back to Nike, when you see the swoosh, it's Nike, right? It doesn't even have to say the words underneath it. Sometimes they do appear, maybe on a shirt or something, but most times it doesn't. But we all still know what it is because we recognize that symbol. So that's what you're after.
Right. Perfect. So do you think that copying successful brands out there Like, let's say I'm just starting out and I want to look at what another organization is doing and just kind of take what they're doing and copy it, but try to make it my own. What do you think about that approach?
I don't like it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not authentic. And people,
Mm,
we all have intuition, and we all know when someone is just imitating or copying and not being genuine to who they are or what they're doing. And especially when it comes to solopreneurs. So if your stuff looks just like, I don't know, Tony, what's his name? Tony Robbins.
yeah.
If you're doing exactly his thing, people are going to say, "Oh, he's just trying to be like Tony Robbins." And then they'll go to Tony Robbins' website, right?
Right. Right.
So it's very important to have a genuine representation. And that's a lot of what the work that I do is. What is that genuine self that you want to bring out and make everyone aware of? So solopreneur branding is very close to personal branding because of that, where company branding or nonprofit organization is a little different. Even though we do come up with a persona that we're portraying,
Mm.
it's not quite on the individual. So your face is part of your brand
Hmm.
when you're a solopreneur.
You're right. I was trying to hide mine, generally speaking. I was actually even torn about that, even on my website. Like, do I include a picture of myself somewhere on the site? Do I make it more prominent, less prominent? That was part of kind of my thinking process too. And so I did eventually put my own image on my site, but it's on page 6, if you know what I mean. You know, like it's not on the forefront. So when I think about branding, at least the first time I was thinking about it, that it was really about like, I need to attract clients. I need something that will bring in clients. Um, and my thinking didn't go very far past that. What are your experiences with that approach? That, branding is really about what you can do just to attract clients.
That's a big part of it. So having that emotional connection with someone is what's going to uh, convince them to buy, actually.
Hmm.
So kind of tying into your question earlier with, if I just have a really great service, that's true. But if you're not making a connection with them, what is going to convince them to buy that service? They might be like, "Oh, this looks really great, but I don't really know this person, so why would I buy it?" And
Hmm.
we also make, this is getting a little bit into the psychology of things. We also tend to purchase based on emotion. So that's why there's marketing techniques with hitting the pain point and then providing the solution. I personally don't like the pain point technique, but it works,
Hmm.
right? So if you're struggling with this and this and this, then here, and you hit that pain point and then you twist the knife.
Ugh.
That feels really, really aggressive to me. So I approach it more from, if you've heard of Simon Sinek, anybody out there, that if you have not heard of Simon Sinek, watch his TED Talks. They're amazing. And he talks about the why, connecting on the why. So if my reason for doing what I do resonates with you and you believe in my why and my vision, then you're going to connect with me and trust me, and then therefore be willing to buy from me. And that's really what the essence is of that whole technique.
Hmm. And that's interesting. I have clients that are not just those folks who need help with websites. I go a little bit beyond that and do technical work as well. And in some cases, I've found that starting out small, like working on a small project, maybe it's even just a short technical consultation for half an hour or an hour, something like that. Um, that gives an opportunity for clients to actually meet you, know you, build some trust, see what your working style is, see if there's compatibility and things like that. And that is a difficult thing to convey when it's like a website or a newsletter or social media marketing strategy, if you will, to try to bring people into that, to what you're doing, why. So I appreciate you calling out those resources to try to get into what is your why and how can you convey that through a branding process. But again, it's really hard to separate out branding and marketing in these conversations. And just want to point out,
it's
go
a
ahead.
very fine line. Yeah.
Yeah. And we are hoping to really dig into that part of the conversation around branding in the next podcast. We are going to talk about here again, we'll talk about what is branding, talk about what is marketing, and make some distinctions that'll make it easier for you in your branding journey to understand the difference. And that is going to come up in your conversations with folks that you might be working with. Let's say you're working with a marketing agency to help you with your branding process and your marketing strategy and things like that. There are going to be a lot of terms that come up, and it can be really confusing to see what those differences are and what the overlap happens to be for that. So one of the last questions I had for you around branding and some of the misconceptions out there is that once you have a brand, that's fine. You don't have to be stuck with that brand. It's going to be easy to change over time. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, having done a few rebrands, the way that I approach that is to bring in some elements of the old brand so that the connection is made. And it's also good to build up before the change, prepare your audience for the change. So, hey, we've been doing a lot of great work and we're going to be announcing this wonderful new way that we're presenting our company or whatever, and get them excited about it, because then they'll be looking for it. Oh, what's going to be different? And that actually creates a memorable experience for your audience as well. And again, it does take a little time after that change. Once you're starting to bring in new people, then those new people are going to be associating with that newer brand. But you need to bring your audience with you when you do that. Don't just change and then and then your people will be like, what happened? So rebranding it's a slightly different journey, right? Because of that,
I appreciate that, because I've also been through branding changes at organizations that I've worked for. Some of those changes have been well planned out, lots of communication. I like to call it change management. So you're not just changing, you are authentically and carefully managing that change and letting people know about it over time, so there are not too many surprises about it. Although you want to keep some of the surprises, I think, for your launch. But it's also like when you're changing your logo, for example, your symbol for your organization, changing fonts, whatever those components are with your brand. That's far reaching. It's not just your website, for example. That's also going to be perhaps if you have business cards, or if you have stationery, or if you have ads out there. It is a comprehensive change. So from my perspective, branding changes are not they are complicated.
Yes.
But there's a path to do it.
Yes.
So that, I think, wraps things up for our first episode of BrandMe360. When Veronica and I first talked about doing this, we had this huge list of things that we could talk about, and realized that, we're going to probably have to break that up a little bit and spread that out over a few episodes, because there's just so much to talk about. where it comes to branding journeys. So I really look forward to working with Veronica, having these podcasts, and then also over time, getting some involvement from our listeners. So looking for the questions that you have and things like that. And so we'll be providing links to our social media accounts, our website, and giving you opportunities to send your questions in. And we'll look forward to diving into some of those questions in future episodes of BrandMe360. So Veronica, thanks again for participating in this. I'm so looking forward to this, not only helping people with their branding journey, but this journey itself of you and I working together and having this podcast and really talking through this. You may see that we're not scripted. We tend to just be more informal with our conversation style and our perspectives on this. And yeah, I really look forward to continuing this conversation with you.
Likewise, this is going to be a fun experiment and journey as well. And I really am very appreciative for, I don't even remember how the idea was born. I think in one of our just conversations we were having, we were like, other people need to hear this.
Absolutely. It was the organic,
Yeah.
Approach to things, which I think is a lot more realistic. That's real life. Right. Very rare that things are going to happen in a very linear process.
Exactly. And our conversations are very organic too. So, hey, we're just being ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we want to help you be yourselves as well as you go through your process of building your brand, whether it's a brand that you haven't created yet, or it's a brand that you've had for a while and you're looking at possibly changing that up. So again, thanks for listening. Thanks for your continued support of what we're doing here. And we look forward to future episodes of BrandMe360. Again, my name is James.
And I'm Veronica.
And you've been listening to BrandMe360. Thank you.
Thank you.